Populism has become a major ideology and rose to the forefront of modern politics over a decade ago from the coattails of the Great Recession. In the Western Hemisphere, we have the election of Donald Trump and Brazil's election of Bolsonaro. Major European countries have also attempted, some successfully, to elect populist leaders, as is the case in the UK, Norway, and Switzerland, and unsuccessfully tried in countless others, including France, Italy, and Sweden. In the book The Populist Explosion, How the Great Recession Transformed American and European Politics, John Judis explains that populism has no set of features that make it politically left or right-wing, that both the Bolsheviks and Donald Trump are considered populist, and that what really makes populism is the element of extremism and scapegoating. The people in a populist movement can be anybody from blue-collar workers to students to the middle class. What matters is that they are distinct from an elite class, or the establishment, and that this class is exploitational in some regard. Maybe they exercise wealth for political gain, or maybe they have a vested interest in keeping the masses poor. The 2008 financial crisis accelerated the widening gap in income inequality between the 1% and the 99%, and the financial deregulation, overvalued dollar, and regressive tax policies have all made a clear distinction between the elite and working class in capitalist economies. This ultimately allowed populist leaders to point the finger at the elite with allegations that they are globalists, slashing jobs and exporting them, or privileged elites that have never worked a day in their life and ultimately win themselves a seat in public office. The book was a great insight into the rise of populism. However, it got me thinking that it didn't explain a crucial point that realistically truly allowed the rise of populism to take place. I would like to expand on the idea that alongside the Great Recession, the rise of social media around the same time has been an equal or greater factor in the rise of populist politicians and parties. Judis did not mention how the rise of social media at the same time as the recession gave the tool of mass communication to the leaders that used the Great Recession and the financial destruction it imposed on those that are not a part of the elite class to further their political cause. The powder keg was lit after the Great Recession, as there was a clear distinction between classes. Those that were affected lost everything and looked for explanations that populist leaders were quick to offer. Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter have all been platforms adopted by these populist leaders to reach a large audience and snowball their internet presence to the forefront, gaining adherents and followers exponentially. As shown by the COVID-19 pandemic, people will accept things told to them, be it pseudoscientific facts or misinformation regarding political opposition, without thinking whether the evidence or the scientific process supports what is being said. It is this lack of critical thinking that has combined with an extreme amount of information available for any layperson to need to sift through to find the truth, which has enabled populist parties to gain supporters having only a vague platform scapegoating a separate, elite class distinct from whatever the populist party manifests as its people. This begs the question, what can be done to reel in the detrimental social and political impact that social media has caused? If you were to ask Mark Zuckerberg, as members of the American Congress already have, he would argue that Facebook has no clear legal definition of either hate speech or misinformation to use for their policies, and that the backlash Facebook would receive if he were to implement more restrictive policies on hate speech and misinformation than those that exist currently would be enormous, as he is not a publicly elected official and he and his company should not have to be the one to make that decision, that instead, people democratically elected to power need to be the ones to restrict what can and cannot be said. I'm inclined to agree with Zuckerberg as social media is ever more prevalent in people's lives. It is essentially a modern-day town square, a public space for people to socialize, transact, and get informed. Because of social media's likeness to a public space in the digital age, I do believe that it being governed, but like a public space, is the correct logical solution in the best interest of everybody. This would prevent people banned from platforms, including politically populist leaders, from arguing that they have been censored unjustly by anybody other than the public who refuse to hear their misinformation nor their attempts at scapegoating. We have seen how populist leaders like Donald Trump weaponize social media However, there is evidence that foreign countries with an interest in the social destabilization of democratic countries, like Russia and China, have used social media to sow dissent among subjects of democracies by spreading misinformation and causing social unrest. Correct governance of social media would also serve to combat foreign influence of domestic civilians that seeks to push people towards populist leadership, as they understand that a country with a high degree of social instability can be taken advantage of. There are those that would say that government restricting any form of speech is authoritarian, is a slippery slope to total censorship. However, one cannot falsely shout fire in a movie theater or bomb in an airport. As citizens, we recognize that there are times where allowing complete freedom of speech, free from consequences, is undesirable in practice, and that the ability of social media to spread messages to a seemingly infinite audience is one area in which allowing things like misinformation can be extremely harmful to a democracy. Circling back to the book, expanding on the reasoning behind what caused the populist explosion to include social media strengthens Judis's arguments even more so, and he speculates that in the future a major event similar to the Great Recession would further push people towards populism. We don't have to speculate anymore. COVID-19 is that event, and the backlash caused by lockdowns and vaccine passports have enabled a populist party in Canada, the People's Party of Canada, to receive over 5% of the vote in the recent federal election. The leader of the party, Maxime Bernier, already has more followers on Twitter than Erin O'Toole of the Conservative Party. His platform is growing rapidly, and he has not shied away from questioning the legitimacy of COVID vaccines to combat the illness, and has publicly stated that he would not receive it himself. Social media and populist leaders are a match made in heaven. Legislation to combat misinformation would be detrimental to populist leaders. Thank you.